take the mark. Oh, he's a light, Gary Ablett. Look at this. Here is the magician at work. He shoots towards goal. What more can you say?
Hargraves kicks inside the 50, bounces in front of Burns. Burns magnificently. This deserves a goal, and he's got it. What a classic.
Inboard, awkward kick by Colbert. Half ball, 50-50. Riccardi, brilliant. What a goal this will be. Magic.
He can't break free of the tackle, and Rook rolls it along the line. That is amazing.
But in comes Goggin once again. Goggin strikes goalwards, he kicks. He's put it through.
Steve Johnson, another one who the Cats will be hoping gets up today. Oh, and again there's a turnover, and Ablett, the little genius, drives it home. Chapman can run in and finish the job. And there it is. It's the Cats.
It's the cream of Kiddimia Park. It's the Cats Whiskers.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Cats Whiskers. I'm Mark Brunger, filling in for our Captain Courageous Wes Cusworth, who is out with an ingrown toenail this week, so he'll be missing for a couple of weeks with that. So I'm joined by Gus Marini. Hi Gus, welcome to you.
Hello, Mark. Hello, listeners. Yes, good to have you steering the ship for us, Mark. Pity about Wes's ingrown toenail. It sounds pretty severe.
And Anthony Pekovic is also with us tonight. Welcome to you, Anthony.
It's a very great pleasure to be here, gentlemen.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a special guest this week because circumstances beyond our control. So we thought we'd put the three great minds together and have a bit of a chat about a few topics that are buzzing around, not only the Geelong Football Club, but the world of football in general. And gents, Anthony, for you, a return to the football after a few weeks not being able to attend due to various reasons, but it was a nice night to go back. The twilight game against Hawthorn at GMHBA Stadium, and by gee, we saw a different Geelong to what we'd seen for the past few weeks.
We certainly did. They carried on that second half form that they showed against Essendon, but look, it was a lovely evening for football. The Geelong fans were right into it. There were lots of Hawthorn supporters there. And then this team ran out in the worst jumper I've ever seen. What on earth is wrong with clubs just wearing their traditional Guernsey? Surely there's no clash. Geelong and Hawthorn have been playing each other since 1925. I've never heard anyone not be able to distinguish between the blue and white hoops and those awful gold and brown stripes, and they ran out in something that an under-13 Little League squad would not be comfortable wearing. I just nonplussed as to why clubs make these decisions, but that was the only thing that ruined my night. I'd like to beat Hawthorn, not some Hawthorn imposter that turned up on Saturday night.
Gus, one of the great highlights for me personally on Saturday night is I know there's a great love-hate relationship between Geelong and Hawthorn, which goes back a number of years now. Thank you, Jeff Kennett, and various other things in the past. But by gee, the reception that Hawthorn got when they ran out onto GMHBA Stadium as we welcome you was nothing short of frosty, I think is fair to say.
Well, it's a good thing to say because our crowd does get criticised by the general public as being a little bit too, dare I say, kind and courteous to, not that you have to be, I suppose, rude or anything like that, but I think, the Geelong crowd does take a while to fire up. And if we can make this a bit of a cauldron, then it does add the 19th man like we see Collingwood has, and other teams like Richmond in their glory days.
Yeah, it was a great atmosphere in there, and certainly a great game. Geelong dominating almost from quarter time, and we saw a return, as Anthony said, to some really top class football, and Geelong playing the game that pretty much took him to the premiership in 2022. But I suppose one of the disappointing things, Gus, is that we celebrated him breaking the club record a few weeks ago when we spoke with his father, Jack Hawkins. But troublesome times for the Hawk. Although I was encouraged to hear Chris Scott saying late last week that his rehab is going pretty well at this stage, and he's relatively confident that the Hawk will be back before the season's end. Do you think we'll see the great number 26 again before this season is over for the Cats?
Mark, I don't know, because the way Geelong are playing, you're going to say that they should make finals. And if they get to, say, round 23, 24, and Hawk's back, he's formed before getting injured, as we know, and with all due respect to the man, he wasn't great. So he wouldn't have had time to, I don't know, go play a couple of games either in the AFL or the VFL to get some form back. So if he was any other player, you just would not mess with it. You wouldn't mess with that setup. So if we're winning games, it means the forward setup's working. Rowan, Shannon Neal, the Smalls, Close, Myers, Manor maybe. So I think the Geelong setup in the last couple of weeks has been so unpredictable. And what it's done as well, it's forced Chris Scott to move Jeremy Cameron down where he needs to be, and that is 40 metres out from goal. There's no point in him getting those cheap kicks around the back half just because we're struggling in the midfield. So to answer your question, Mark, it's going to be, I suppose, an awkward discussion, but it's always got to be team first.
It's going to be very, very difficult to find a way to get him match fit and then contest finals. Because to be perfectly honest, Geelong's setup has looked better in the last few weeks without him in the side. And that's a terribly disrespectful thing to say. But Tom was not competitive enough and has not been competitive enough for quite some time. And he was an anchor, I think, on our scoring, on our forward 50 entries. And all of a sudden, the team looks much more mobile and much more threatening now in the way it's set up than it was a fortnight previously. And they've only made some very minor tinkering changes with the lineup. The biggest change is the fact that Hawkins is out and that the forward line has basically forced us to play Jeremy Cameron closer to goal. And
which is what we should be doing, though, Anthony.
Yeah, I think so. I think the occasional run in through the midfield just to baffle the opposition is a terrific idea. But he's getting older now, and he's also getting pretty beaten up too, playing in the middle of the ground. So, are we a better team with Tom Hawkins in, or are we a better team with Tom Hawkins out? It's going to be really difficult trying to answer that question with only a couple of rounds to go in the season, and then you hit finals with a player that hasn't had the opportunity to demonstrate whether he really is fully match fit and, more importantly, in form.
Yeah, I just hope that it doesn't become Geelong's Achilles heel should they make the finals, and in all likelihood, based on the form we've seen the last 2 weeks, Cats probably should be back in finals calculations now, fortunately. Now, gentlemen, this next topic, I'll start with you, Anthony. I'm just going to say it in one word, and then I'm going to let you two gentlemen have your thoughts on it. And the word for the week, Anthony, is umpiring.
Well, it gets desperate. You're getting to the desperation stage where the biggest umpire basher in the competition in Alistair Clarkson has to come to their defence. That's how desperate the umpiring situation has become. The head of the AFL is treating fans as idiots by saying that umpiring is as good as it's ever been. We've had the idiotic response from Laura Kane. We had that weekly until it was finally stopped, mercilessly, like a horse being put down at the end of the Melbourne Cup. The head of umpiring has gone into the witness protection program. I doubt whether the FBI could find him. John Setka could probably do a better job heading up the umpiring division at the present. At the moment, the interpretations around the rules are confusing a lot of people. And the umpiring standard, I just think the addition of a fourth umpire has not helped the umpiring at all. I don't mind an umpire missing a free kick or making an incorrect decision, but there are three others out there, and they've got to have the power to intervene and respond when clear decisions are made. I'm sick of seeing players being dragged down in marking contests like we saw on the weekend with Dangerfield and Cameron on two occasions, virtually grabbed by the collar, brought to the ground when they're trying to mark the football. Seeing both get up gingerly and look at the umpire as if to say, what the hell's happening there? And there are times now in the games where players literally stop waiting for a call from an umpire that never comes. And I think the AFL need to address this issue, and they need to address it honestly and openly and in a transparent manner. We know it's a difficult game to umpire. Anyone who's been involved in the game knows that. But the expectations of supporters around the rules and their understanding of the rules, and we now have players saying that they don't understand what is expected of them in given situations. And of course, as I've said on this program before, we should be wearing black armbands for the handball, because now a handball can be interpreted as just about anything. We even have had the Isaac Quainer rugby league throw over the shoulder cleared as being sufficient attempt. It wouldn't have been out of place at one of those state of origin rugby league games played recently at the MCG.
Anthony, you've echoed my sentiments all year, and I think, with all due respect to Laura Kane, I think to come out and patronise the AFL community, we're not, not talking about us three in here, the football public, but one thing I think that did improve in the last 2 weeks, especially in this round, was this 360 of spinning a guy around and then
finally
continually playing on. They've jumped on that, and good on them, because
yes.
And thank you to Chris Scott, because he pointed out at that Carlton game about 8 weeks ago where Colin Jasny spun Kerner around and basically spun him. It was like a little league game. He spun him into an open goal. And Colin Jasny's only other option was to sling tackle him to the ground and basically maybe hit his head on the ground, because he thought, I've got a hold of you. The umpire hasn't blown his whistle for a ball up or a hole in the ball. He still won't blow it. I've got to continue with my rotation of you to sort of try and get the ball to be released. It won't happen. And Kerno's gone, thank you very much. And he's just toe poked the ball in for a goal. What they've done, I think you want to know, is a couple of players in the weekend, not in our game, but I think the Collingwood game was one of them. They got 360. They weren't totally retarded. They got the ball away, and the umpire called hold the ball. And I thought that's fantastic. And what I think they're doing as well, they're blowing the ball up a lot quicker now. Yeah. So they're not forcing players now to try and all of a sudden they've got no option but to sort of use a dangerous tackle, because I know that the rhetoric was, or the thinking was by the AFL years ago, this is the irony though, Mark and Anthony, was no, don't blow your whistle, because it stifles a game and it's an eyesore. Let it go until the ball comes out. It's a better spectacle. So that's what led to this whole problem. They've done a 180 on that and gone, no, blow the whistle straight away, because we're going to have guys concussed. But I prefer what they're doing now, because I think if you're 360 in a tackle, that's it. You've had long enough to get rid of it, and you shouldn't be entitled to just get your kick to it. And the poor guy tackling you's got the guy tackling you cannot do anything more than what he's doing, but to calmly put you to ground.
Exactly right. So yeah, we need more of that, and I'm glad, because they've talked about this 360 spin for a long time. Yeah. But the umpires haven't been paying it, and all of a sudden in recent weeks they have started to, and I think that's a good, positive, proactive step. And yes, blowing the whistle for a ball up and not having that pile on until the ball eventually emerges somewhere, that is also a good idea as well.
Yeah, look, I agree entirely with you boys, and from my point of view, as someone who's not been watching football for as long as you two, but certainly long enough, the game seems a little bit foreign to me these days. I don't quite understand a lot of the interpretations, and we talk about it not being an easy game to umpire. And I think the AFL through the rules committee over the years, and certainly coaches have a little bit of blame in this as well, in trying to manipulate the system for their own benefit. The situation has come that we are now relying on 8 different sets of interpretation in a game of football. We saw the interesting decision to pay a deliberate across the goal line against Essendon, against Geelong late in the game a couple of weeks ago at the MCG, and yet in the same round there was a similar incident which was almost carbon copy and was paid a behind. So this is where the footy fan gets confused, because they watch their team play and they get served up one set of rules or one set of interpretations, and then they turn on and watch the TV game that night and they get a completely different set of interpretations. And I think that's what drives the football supporters mad. And please don't start me on, I think we've actually extended ruck lotto to now be ground lotto, because when the umpire blows the whistle these days, everyone holds their breath because they just don't know what they're going to pay.
Well, in the ruck contests, basically, we know at the centre bounce, they can't make contact, pushing contact, and take their eyes off the ball. So the slightest touch there is penalised. Whereas around the ground bounces and at boundary throw-ins, you can commit grievous bodily harm to your opponent and it's play on. It is essentially a wrestling match where the biggest, strongest ruckman wins, no matter what they do. And that is a complete anomaly. Why is it so Tiggy Touchwood at a centre bounce, yet at a boundary throw-in or at a bounce around the ground, it is anything goes, all bets are off. But we saw the game against Geelong and Essendon. There were so many errors in the third quarter of that one match alone, most of them favouring Geelong, incidentally, that the AFL refused or couldn't come out to explain them because there were just so many of them. And even then, in private conversations with the Essendon coach, Brad Scott, there were major philosophical differences between what Brad Scott understood to be the rules and what the umpires were saying were the rules. The Jordan Ridley tackle, where he had no prior opportunity, had his arms pinned and had no opportunity to get rid of the ball, being paid as being insufficient attempt to get rid of the ball when he had no prior opportunity. And yet the AFL just continued to argue that decision was correct. Yet the one where Tom Stewart tried to barge through the pack, didn't get a handball away, dropped the ball to the ground, that was considered to be sufficient attempt.
Yeah.
You cannot explain that to the average supporter because it goes against every instinct we have as a supporter about how the game should be played and umpired.
Just quickly on that, Mark, I'll ask you as well, Anthony, but they went so hard on the dissent. They went over the top. They went too hard. So in other words, if you just glanced sideways at an umpire, you pulled up a 50. We didn't want that as supporters. Well, what we didn't mind, if they're giving the umpire a bit of lip and you call 50, that's fair enough because that filters down to the lower grades and to the kids. What they've done now is completely thrown away. Every week, in every game in every week now, I'm sure you guys are the same, we are seeing guys mouth off. The only time, and I bet you guys know when it's the only time they'll get a 50. Do you know when it is?
When they don't throw the ball back to the umpire.
No, it's when they point to the scoreboard. If they point to the scoreboard and tell the umpire, have a look at that, that's the only time they're blowing 50 for dissent. They're not blowing it, and you can read their lips, and they're mouthing off, and they're waving their arms. If a player just put his arms up in a questionable fashion, he was 50. And we don't want that. But when a guy is remonstrating, that's fair call. But the thing is what you were saying before, Anthony, that, you know, as a supporter, you were so red hot on it, and it's probably cost some teams games. It cost Freo a game against Carlton. right? So now, by comparison, every team is doing it every week, and unless they're putting the smart players know not to point to the scoreboard. Don't say to the umpire, "Have a look at that," because it's a personal insult as they take it, and they give you. It's the only time they'll give you 50 for dissent. I don't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what supporters are going through at the moment. And the AFL, though, their official line is the game has never been better umpired. And
I'm not sure what Andrew Dillon was doing that day, but I think he needs a new script writer if that's what they're coming up with. Gentlemen, we know that the time-honoured Petkovic medal is almost reaching its in-camera stage. Season, but might be worth a little chat about Geelong's best and fairest and who might be shaping up as the clubhouse leader at the moment. Gus, what are you thinking?
I reckon this young fella, if he didn't get injured, would be right up there. That would have been Tanner Bruin. I thought he was having a magnificent season. But the two that stand out for me, and Max Holmes and Zach Guthrie. I thought Zach Guthrie, probably his last 3 weeks haven't been great, but I just thought, especially when the team was losing and going through that rough patch, I just thought he was sensational. So if I had to have a guess of 1 and 2, I'd probably have Max Holmes in front of Zach Guthrie, and probably you could throw a blanket over about 3 or 4 others for third place.
Yeah, I think Max Holmes has been the standout player this season so far for Geelong. He's certainly been our most attacking weapon. We'd like to play him off half back because he's so effective there. We'd like to play him on the wing because of his creativity. We'd like to play him in the midfield because he's a reasonably good clearance player as well. He still fumbles a bit below his knees. I think it's still a bit of a slight weakness in his game, but he's certainly stronger overhead than ever before. And his ability and willingness to take the game on, when he does take a mark or receive possession, he's very, very keen to get the ball moving, run his full distance, take a couple of bounces if need be, and drives the ball long and deep into the forward. We get deep forward 50 entries when Holmes is bringing the ball into the forward line, which I think is really, really helpful. So his consistency has been sensational. And yes, Zach Guthrie, I think he's, for the reason in the last couple of weeks, he's played a slightly different role. I think with the moving of Tom Stewart into the midfield, they've decided to try and make Mitch Duncan the spare coming out of the back half, which means Guthrie has a greater responsibility on taking a key opposition forward. And I think he's done that job especially well. So he's had to change his style of play a little bit slightly in the last few weeks, along with a couple of other Geelong players as well. Remembering you've got young Lawson Humphreys, who's been put into the back line as well, who obviously has to play a particular role, which sometimes changes the roles of other players within the defences. Brian Myers has been very good. There's been a couple of games where his ball use has been a little bit dodgy. He's been trying to thread the eye of a needle with a camel. Just do the simple things well, Brian. We don't expect you to be a rocket scientist. Just make sure that the ball from your foot lands with a player wearing the blue and white hoops. That is exceedingly important in the role that you have in transitioning. And of course, Tyson Stengel's been a particular threat in most games. He's looked our most lively forward. Up until Saturday night, he was our leading goal kicker for the season. Jeremy Cameron's just gone past him. But those players have been the standout for Geelong this season on a consistent basis.
I tend to agree with both of you there, and particularly the Tyson Stengel part there. I think certainly in the last probably 3 or 4 weeks since he's got the contract situation now done and dusted and put away for the next 5 years, I think we've seen him release himself a little bit now. And his form in the last 2 or 3 weeks has been superb, and I'm expecting to see him make a late charge, maybe up the leaderboard late in the season. But I do agree with you. Max Holmes has been outstanding off half back, and when he's been thrown into the centre as well. So I think he'd probably be the favourite at this stage. And I suppose you've got to include Tom Stewart in there because we know the love affair that the Cats coaching staff who give the votes have with Tommy, and that's not to say he hasn't he wouldn't deserve it, but certainly it's probably been a lesser year for Tom this year because teams have started working out that he is the key to Geelong down back there and have been giving him a hard time of recent weeks. But yeah, it's a strange game, football, and when I listen to press conferences after games and reflect on the game I saw versus the game that gets talked about, it's like there's a little bit of a gulf there at times. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Well, Anthony, you mentioned young Humphreys. What a revelation this young fella's been. He looks like he's a ready-made footballer and he's already played 150 games. He's just slotted in.
He was ready 8 weeks ago, Mark. I can tell you that. I saw him in a VFL game early in the season and I thought, he's lightning in a bottle. He's cool, calm and collected. He's good overhead. He doesn't panic. He's quick. We need quick players at Geelong. We don't have an overabundance of them. He had to work his way into the team. It was long overdue. We then saw, of course, finally promote Sean Manor again on the weekend. His game was absolutely superb. I thought every time a Hawthorn player went to ground, he seemed to wrap them up like a boa constrictor. 14 tackles, I believe, on top of his 20 possessions. He was simply marvellous on the weekend, which shows that there are some players around there that in the VFL that I just wonder who's next, because there's a couple there that have been playing particularly well. And I mentioned Mitch Hardy in the VFL. At some point, we've got to see whether the fella can play at senior level. He's clearly too good for VFL level. He got 36 possessions yesterday against the Box Hill Hawks, kicked 2 goals. He seems a ready-made type, and we're only going to find out one way, and that's by playing him, which means going back to Mark O'Connor or going back to Brandon Parfitt or going back to some of the other players, Jed Buse or Mullen. Instead of going back to the tried and tested, let's have a look at who else is there. There's another fellow called Ted Closey, who is also playing excellent VFL football, and again looks a ready-made type. He's had one taste of senior football coming on as a sub in the final round of last season, but is another one that we ought to turn to should the opportunity rise in the seniors as well.
Anyone you've got your eye on, Gus, at the moment?
I was with Anthony with regard Mitch Hardy's just banging down the door, and I just think it's quite ironic when all and sundry knew that he was our midfield that was costing us in that horrible slump we had. We had absolutely nothing to lose by playing him. If we played him, of course, he would have been lambs to the slaughter because there was no Dangerfield, no Guthrie. He would have been coming in as a debutant. But we would have learned something about him, and we would have been no worse off. It was never going to cost us a game of footy when you're going to give 50-point leads to Port Adelaide and 30-point leads to Richmond and GWS. It's not as if we were in the game and there was a kick in it all the way through, and a young kid like that might have cost you. No, that was a time to experiment. The problem I feel for him now is Geelong doesn't have that luxury where we used to have from years ago. We would be 3 games clear in second place or whatever it might be, where we would notoriously bring in kids and just try them and manage players. We don't have that luxury now, and I'm thinking if Tenebroon's only 2 weeks away, and fingers crossed for Cam Guthrie, because I just don't see how you have a finals campaign without him if you're going to be serious. How does Mitch Hardy get a game? Does he get a game this week against Collingwood as a sub? That's probably the time is now for him to come in, and maybe he comes in for the expense of, say, Clark. That's probably the thing, Anthony, because Clark wasn't meant to play. Nevitt was meant to play. Maybe it's the opportunity where you look at Nevitt and Hardy and Clark and you go, well, you're not really losing much if we gave the kid a run this way.
Yeah, it's like for like. You've got to find out to see if we hadn't have tried Manor on the weekend, you'd never know that he was capable of the type of game he played. That's just the point I'm trying to make. Yeah. There would be a lot of Geelong supporters who would be looking at that going, I did not know he could play as good as that.
Absolutely.
And you don't find out these things until you play these guys. A lot of people, when Humphreys was picked, went, who the hell is he? If you've been watching the VFL, you'd know exactly what he's capable of, and you wonder, can he play like that in the seniors? And you don't know until you try.
Never know if you never have to have a go.
Hardy is the question. Can he play that way in the senior team? If he can, we get another midfielder. It's not like we've got a vast reserves of midfielders. We don't. And if he can play that way, and he can in the seniors, gives us that opportunity.
Well, gentlemen, that's a great point to leave the discussion on. So many things to ponder between now and September. Hopefully the Cats are a part of that September action, but hopefully we'll have a special guest next week to talk to about things. But if not, I'm sure we can reconvene again and go part 2 on some of the topics we've talked about tonight. Gus Moretti, thank you to you for joining us, and also Anthony Pekovic.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Anthony.
And thank you to everyone for listening to this week's edition of the Cats Whiskers. A very big thank you also to our listeners through Sport FM over in Perth. Great to talk to you people over there again. Hope things are going well over there. This is Mark Brunker signing off on the Cats Whiskers on behalf of the panel. Wishing you a great week, and we'll talk to you again next week.